Okay, so next to z-test is t-test. This is another type or another way to test your hypothesis. So, unsa may difference with t-test and z-test? So, kung si z-test is, ang iyahang sample size should be greater than or equal to 30. Kang t-test, si sample size is less than 30. So, asa mo na siya sugod? So, less than 30, 29, 28, 27, taman paubos. So, mana siya dapat ang sample size ni t-test. So, if imong sample size is 28, ang gamiton t-test. If ang sample size is 25, 15, 9, ang gamiton nato kay t-test. Also, isa ka timailhan that we were going to use t-test is when its standard deviation is unknown. So, if wala si standard deviation, t-test ang gamiton. Okay. So, let's proceed. So, t-test, just like with z-test, naa siya'y kaugalingong formula. Wala na kayo siya'y kalahian nga nausog. The only difference there is the symbol for our standard deviation, kaning letter S. Diba, for the z-test, ang iyahang symbol ni standard deviation is this one, sigma. For t-test, ang symbol ni standard deviation is S, small letter S. This is for the sample standard deviation. So, kaning sigma is for our population standard deviation. Kaning S nato, small letter S, is for sample standard deviation. So, maura na siya kalahian, but all in all, the formula for t-test and z-test are similar with each other. So, nga naman ang formula for t-test is S. Anong S man ang sample standard deviation? Para ti mailhan nga it is for the sample and this sigma is for the population. Population man is because of its large sample size. Nganong large man? Because ang N is greater than or equal to 30. Si sample standard deviation is for the small sample size. Nganong small man? Because the sample size is less than 30. So, mo na siya kalahian ra sa formula. Wala ra kayo na usog. And for the decision rule, it is somehow the same with z-test. If t computed is greater than your t critical, we have to reject your null hypothesis. If your t computed is less than t critical, we are going to do not reject the null hypothesis, or we are going to accept the null hypothesis. So, anong t computed? Because it is the product of the t-test. So, kung sa z-test, ang tawag nato kay z critical and z computed or z value, sa t-test, ang tawag pod nato sa ilaha kay t computed and t critical. So, let's proceed na diretso sa example. This is easy na siya pag-understand because kabalo naman ta sa gist sa z-test. Pari-parihas ra ni silang duha. So, let's have this example number 1. This is for the decision-making ra gihapon. So, our t computed here is greater than our t critical. What will be our decision man dayon? So, let's go back to the decision rule. So, asa man to siya natunong? Unsa tong problem? So, si t computed, which is 2.02, is greater than our t critical. Asa man na siya natunong? Okay, natunong siya dinhi. So, we have to reject our null hypothesis. So, that will be our decision to reject the null hypothesis. You can also check this by making your curve. So, let's make our curve. So, unsa gayto atong basihan sa tail? Okay, ang basihan nato sa tail is ang t critical. Unsa may t critical nato? So, that is 1.771. And then, we have to shade our rejection region. So, So this will be our rejection region. Now, asa man ni nato ibutang si T computed nga 2.02. Asa man na siya natunog? Is it here sa left side of the 1.771 or diri sa right side? So naa siya somewhere here. Si 2.02 or our T computed. So it is included in our rejection region. Appeal siya sa rejection region. Now, kay appeal man siya sa rejection region, unsa man dayon ang mahitabo? Okay, so that is right. We have to reject our null hypothesis. Now, let's proceed with example number 2. So, sa example number 2, greater si T critical. Mas dako si T critical nga 2.552 compared with 2.24. So, let's check the decision rule. Asa man na siya natunong? So, natunong siya dinhi. Unsa man dayon ato ang result. So, we have to do not reject the null hypothesis or accept the null hypothesis. So, do not reject the null hypothesis. So, we can also check that again by using our curve. So, in making the tail, unsay basihan? Okay, ang basihan kay ang T critical. We have 2.552. After that one, we have to shade for our rejection region. Unsay tawag ani kaning naay shade nga red, so this is rejection region. Now, si T computed na po ang atong i-plot. Asa man na siya na-belong? Does it belong to the right side or to the left side of 2.552? So, 2.24 is somewhere here. 2.24. Na-appeal ba siya sa ato ang rejection region? Wala siya na-appeal. So, kay wala pa siya na-appeal sa rejection region, ang ato ang buhaton kay do not reject the null hypothesis or atua siyang i-accept the null hypothesis. So, maura ni siya ang decision making when it comes to rejecting or accepting your null hypothesis. This is somehow the same with z-test. Pari-parihas ni silang duha. Okay, so this is another the explanation. So, let's proceed with this one. So, diri, wala gihatag si, unsay ang wala gihatag diri? Okay, ang wala gihatag kay si T critical. So, sa previous nato nga example, si T critical is given. Whereas, diri nga mga examples, T critical is missing. Now, this is the only part nga na-change with t-test. Ang pagpangita ni t-critical, they have different process compared sa pagpangita ni z-critical. Nga naman, si z-critical, naaman tayo atong shortcut nga table. Agatong gipakita na diretsyo ang critical values of z. Agatong shortcut nga version sa ato ang table. Whereas, kani si t-critical, wala tong shortcut nga version sa table. The only table that we will use is the original one. This one. Taas nga table. And as you can see sa ato ang table, natay mabantayan diri nga DF. So, kaning DF is the only thing that changed. Gikan sa z-test, padulong sa t-test. Maurin ni siya nalahi sa pagpangita sa ato ang z-critical. So, unsa man dayon na? Unsa may formula ni DF? So, naatay formula ni DF nga sample size minus 1. Mauna, diri sa example nato, included sa given si sample size. So, let's try to have this. Unsaon man dayon ni siya. So, for number 1, wala pa gihatag si T critical. Ang naa pa diri is ang confidence level, which is 99% rather, then ang one-tailed and ang iyahang n. So, unsaon man dayon ni pagpangita ni T critical? So, ang importante diri nga part is ang atuang degrees of freedom. Unsa ning DF? This is your, okay, that's right. This is your degrees of freedom. So, what's the formula for DF? So, the formula for DF is n minus 1. Unsa gay ng n? Okay, n is your sample size. So, pila may sample size nimo ani sa given? So, you have 21 minus 1. So, your DF will be 20. So, naano kay DF, unsa pay laing kinahanglan nimo? You will also need your alpha. So, unsa may alpha nimo ani? Na kay 99% confidence level. What is your alpha? Unsa ginang alpha? That's your level of significance. Unsa nang level of significance? That is your, okay, yes, that's your probability of committing type 1 error. So, kay 99% man ka sure that you will arrive with the correct decision sa inyong research, pila may bilin ana niya sa 100% na kay 99% nga chance to make your research right. Pilay bilin? Kay 1% na lay bilin. So, in decimal form, that will be 0.01. Okay, so na kay alpha. You also know that your study is one-tailed. So, kung one-tailed man siya, si alpha, wala kay buhaton ni alpha. Nganong wala man kay buhaton ni alpha? Because it is one-tailed. Okay, now, nanatay DF, nanapod tay alpha. So, bagitaon dayon nato siya sa atuang table, kung unsa ang atuang T-critical. So, let's go to the table. Unsa to atuang DF? Our DF is 20. Okay. So, gikan diri sa DF, naog dayon ka paubos. Tama ni 20. So, na kay 20 diri as your DF. Now, let's check again the problem. And then, our alpha or level of significance is 0.01. So, gikan ni 20, just move to the right. Okay, just move to the right. Tama ni 0.01. Gikan ni 0.01 sa taas, panaog din ka tama ni 20. So, kung unsa ang nadinha, that will be your T-critical. So, ang say naa nato diri, 2.528. So, 2.528 is our T-critical. So, let's write it here. Our T-critical is 2.528. So, which is greater now? Our T-computed or T-critical? So, ato ang T-critical is greater than our T-computed. So, unsa may decision nato ani? Let's check the decision rule. So, natunong siya dinhi. Si T-critical mas dako kaysa ni T-computed. Unsay buhaton? Okay, that is correct. Do not reject your null hypothesis. So, mao din na siya ato ang decision. Do not reject null hypothesis. So, you can also check this with your curve. So, we can make a curve here. So, unsa to, the same with z-test, ato ang basihan is ang T-critical. So, asa man na siya dapit na butang. So, naa siya diri dapit 2.528. Let's shade R. Unsay tawag ani nga region? This is your, yes, this is your rejection region. So, now, si T-computed nga 2.34, asa man na siya mabutang? Is it here sa right side ni 2.528 or diri sa left side? So, it is somewhere here, si 2.34. Na-appeal ba siya sa rejection region or wala? So, wala siya na-appeal. So, that means, dili nato siya i-reject or do not reject your null hypothesis. Okay, so let's proceed with example number 2. Now, just like the first example, T-critical, si T-critical nato is not given. So, wala tay T-critical. Kinahanglan pa nato pangitaon si T-critical. Unsay kinahanglan para makita si T-critical, we need this table or T distribution table. So, during the exam, you need to have this table. Okay. Now, diri sa example, natay alpha nga 0.05. It is also stated here that it is two-tailed. Now, kay two-tailed man siya, that means the curve will look like this. Okay, so unsa may buhaton nato ani ni alpha or the level of significance. So kay two-tailed man siya, we have to divide alpha by 2. So unsa may mahitabo? So alpha divided by 2. So that means 0.05 divided by 2, pila man na? That is 0.025. So this will be the alpha that we will be using, 0.025. Then what's next? Unsa may another kinahanglan? We need our DF. Unsa gay ng DF again? That's your, okay, that's right. That's your degrees of freedom. What's the formula for our degrees of freedom? The formula for that is n minus 1. Unsa ng n gani? That's your sample size. Correct. So our n or our sample size is 17. So that will be 17 minus 1. So our DF is 16. So nanatay alpha nga 0.025. And then nanapod tay DF nga 16. So pwede na nato mapangita ang atuang T critical. So pila man dayon na siya. So let's go to our table. So gikan diri ni DF, you go down towards 16. So naa ka diri ni 16. Unsa to ato ang alpha? Our alpha is okay 0.025. So here is 0.025. Just gikan ni 16, go towards the column 0.025. Then gikan diri sa taas, panaog ka diri sa row ni 16. So kung unsa ang naa dinha na value, that will be your T critical. Kini dayon siya inyuhang T critical. So nana din tay value nga T critical 2.120. Is that correct? Okay, that's correct. 2.120. Now, let's compare it dayon with T computed. Okay, mag-decide naman dayon ta whether to reject or accept your null hypothesis. Now, which is greater? Si T computed or T critical? So, ang greater is ang T critical. No, not T critical rather, but our T computed. So, what does it mean? Unsa man dayon ato ang decision ani? To reject or to do not reject our null hypothesis. Now, sige, let's check your answer. Unsa to ang greater nato? Ang T computed. So, let's go to the decision rule. So, it states here nga kung ang T computed is greater than our T critical, we have to reject your null hypothesis. So, you are correct. Note that we have to reject the null hypothesis. Asa naman to? Okay, so our decision here is reject the null hypothesis. Now, this time as well, we can check whether the decision is correct or not using the curve. So, nata diri, let's just draw our rejection region. So, this is your rejection region. Ganong duha man siya because it is two-tailed. Okay, that's correct. So, kay two-tailed man siya, so let's put negative 2.120 sa left. Ganong negative man because it is in the negative end of the distribution. And then 2.120 here sa right because it is part of the positive end of the distribution. Now, the question is, asa manad din na belong ang atuang T computed? Is it here, in the middle, or to the right of 2.120? So, it is somewhere here. Si 2.58. What does it mean? Appeal siya sa rejection region. So, unsa man atong decision ani? Okay, our decision is to reject your null hypothesis. So, ninanaon na dayon ang decision making whether to reject or to accept your null hypothesis. The important thing here is if you know ang DF, also the alpha, and whether it is one-tailed or two-tailed. So, mumatter na kaayo ni siya sa pagpangita sa imuhang T critical. Okay, so this is the explanation of the previous example. So you may browse this one, but this is just the same with what I've explained earlier. So let's have this problem solving example. In a recent survey, a researcher claimed that the average life expectancy of people in a certain country is 72 years. Is his claim correct? If a random sample of 25 deaths from this country showed a mean of 71.2 years, with standard deviation of 1.2 years. So use 99% confidence level. Now, unsa itong first na tong lantawon sa problem in order to know what test we'll use. Okay, if it either by z-test or t-test. Okay, so we will look first for its, yes, that's correct, for its sample size. Now, what's the sample size of this problem? So, nata diri random sample of 25 deaths. So, our sample size is 25. Ganong 25? Okay. Kaning 25 deaths, mao'y gikwaan nato sa atoang data. Gikwaan nato sa atong sample mean ug sa atoang standard deviation. That's why this will be our sample size, ang kaning 25. Now, kaya ang atuang n is 25. Unsa may gamiton ani? Z-test or t-test? Okay, our n is less than 30. So, ang atuang gamiton is t-test. Okay, that's right. T-test ang atuang gamiton. Now, next na tong hubaon is ang, okay, yes, ang purpose sa atuang study. So, makita na to diri, ang purpose sa study is whether to check if ang claim is correct. Unsa man dayon ang claim. So, ang researcher nato nag-claim siya that the average life expectancy of people in a certain region is 72 years. So, mao ni siya ang claim sa ato ang study. So, kana siya nga claim, i-check daw nato if it is correct. Now, let's look at the claim. So, niingon siya nga, ang average life expectancy of people is 72 years. Now, kung miingon tag is, what does it mean? Okay, there's this sense of equality. Pag miingon tag, the average is 72 years. That means the average is equal to 72 years. Now, kaning si equal, asa man na siya nabilong? Sa null hypothesis or sa alternative hypothesis? So, kaning equal, asa ni siya nabilong? Okay, yes, nabilong ni siya sa null hypothesis. So, unsa may hypothesis nga unho na to gama? Kung unsay given sa problem, so maoy unho gamon. So, ang atong ibutang ani kay, okay, atong ibutang kay null hypothesis una. So, unsa man dayon ni siya? So, you assume that your population mean is equal to 72 years. Now, ang atoang next gamon is ang alternative. So, this is easy na din to make because you already have your null. Ang alternative kay opposite ra na siya ni null hypothesis. So, sa man dayon ni atong alternative diri, your mu is not equal to 72 years. Now, after getting that one, what's the next step? Okay, next step is to get your statistical test. So, unsa may unho natong butang diri? Okay, of course, kung unsa nga test ang gamiton, that is t-test. Now, let's check kung unsa siya, one-tailed ba or two-tailed. Ganun kinahanglan na siya i-check because it is important in getting our t-critical. So, is it one-tailed or two-tailed? So, let's look at the alternative hypothesis. Unsa yang symbol na diri? Kinaa siya inequality sign. So, if nin-ana ang atoang symbols alternative, that means it is two-tailed. Okay, so butang nato diri two-tailed. Okay, next, what's the next nga atong hibawon in order to get our t-critical? So, we will need the alpha. Okay, we will need this alpha. Unsa man ang alpha diri? So, wala siya naghatag. But, makita na to nga naa siya, use 99% confidence level. Makita ba nato si alpha from this one? Okay, yes, makita nato si alpha from that one. Pilay bilin, you have 99% confidence. Pilay bilin ana sa probability of committing type 1 error. So nakay 1% nga bilin, and that will be 0.01. Okay, next. Now, this is two-tailed. Unsa man dayon ang atong buhaton? Nabatay buhaton ni alpha? Unsa ginang alpha? That's your level of significance. Natay buhaton ni alpha? Yes, natay buhaton kang alpha. Because this is two-tailed, that means si alpha should be divided by 2. So, sa may hitabuan na, alpha divided by 2, that will be 0.005. So, check sa inyong calculator, 0.01 divided by 2, so that will be 0.005. Next, natong hibaon na pa ba? Yes, in order to get our T critical, we also need our DF. Unsa nang DF gani? Okay, that's your degrees of freedom. Pag may tag DF, that's your degrees of freedom. Unsa gani formula ni DF? That is n-1. Now, unsa atong sample size? So, makita na to diri atong sample size is 25. So, 25 minus 1, that will be 24. So, your degrees of freedom is 24. Okay, so na kay degrees of freedom, and then naana pug kay alpha. What's left? Okay, ang bilin na lang is to find your T critical using the T distribution table. Okay. So let's go to our table. So let's remember what's our DF again. So our degrees of freedom is 24. So erase nato ni. Okay. So gikan diri sa 1, go down to 24. So this is our degrees of freedom, 24. Unsa gani pudto ato ang alpha, our level of significance, it is 0.005. So gikan dayon ni 24, go towards 0.005. After that one, gikan ni 0.05, go towards 24. So, kung unsay mo gawas din ha, that will be your T critical. So, unsa man na, 2.797. So, mo din na atong ibutang diri as T critical. 2.797. Na pwede na ba siya maka-decide? Maka-decide na ta, dili pa. Okay, so dili pa ta maka-decide. Why is that? We still need our T computed, or our T value. So that will be in your step number 3. Unsa kay itong formula for T value? So you have T is equal to the X bar. Unsa nang X bar? Okay, that is your sample mean minus your mu. Unsa nang mu? That's your population mean. All over your standard deviation, small letter s, because this is sample standard deviation, divided by the square root of your n. Unsa nang n? That's your sample size. Now, ang himo na lang buhaton is to substitute. What's your sample mean? So, makita na to diri, ang next diri ni random sample nga 25, na daw siya mean nga 71.2 years. So, si sample size, ang iyang mean kay 71.2 years. Kaning 71.2 years, mean ni siya sa sample size. So, unsa may tawag ani nga mean? So, kana nga mean, ang tawag dayon nato ana kay sample mean. So, 71.2 years, dayon atong ibutang diri, substitute only. Next is what's our population mean. So, our population mean, kinaana dira siya sa claim na butang, which is 72 years. Opo na siya naa sa ato ang hypothesis. So, 71.2 minus 72 years. All over, our sample standard deviation, unsa man. So, given siya diri, that is 1.2 years. Divided by the square root of our sample size, which is 25. Okay. So, after that one, i-calculate ra dayon siya. Okay, so unsa may answer ani? What's our t value? So, our t value is negative 3.33333 and daghan pa nga 3. So, we will write it as like that. Now, kami decide na. Okay, pwede na tamo decide because naana tay t critical and naana pod tay t value. So, that will be your step number 4. So, unsa kay atong una isulat dire? Ang atong isulat is ang t computed. So, positive 3.333. Ngano man? Because we will disregard the negative sign if we will use the decision rule. Is 3.333 is, okay, it is greater than our t critical na 2.797. So, what will be our decision? So, let's go to the decision rule. So, naadiri sa decision rule, if t computed is greater than our t critical, we have to reject the null hypothesis. So, ang decision dayon for this problem, we're going to reject the null hypothesis. Now, we can check this using our curve. So, unsa atong basihan sa atong curve, we will use the t, okay, the t critical. So, this is two-tailed, so naa siya duha ka tail. And since this is two-tailed, you will write here negative your t critical 2.797, and that is for the left side. And for the right side, of course, this will be positive 2.797. Now, you will shade your rejection region. Afterwards, imuda yung ibalanse asa na belong ang atuang t computed. Our t computed is negative 3.333. So, asa man na siya na belong? Is it somewhere here sa left side, somewhere in the middle, or somewhere to the right of 2.797? Okay, so si negative 3.333, it is somewhere here. Sa left ni negative 2.797. So, negative 3.333. So, this belongs to the rejection region. That means our decision should be, okay, should be rejecting our null hypothesis. Now, next, what's the next step here? Okay, you have to make your conclusion. Saan man pagama si conclusion? Now, our decision is to reject the null hypothesis. So, unsa may mahitabo ani atong null hypothesis dire? Okay, kaning null hypothesis, we have to reject this one. And it will lead to the acceptance of our alternative hypothesis. So, ang atong alternative hypothesis states that the average is not equal to 72 years. So, sa may pasabot ani, correct ba ang claim or not? Okay, ang claim nato is not correct. Nganong not correct man siya? Ang claim nato kay mingon siya ang average is equal to 72 years. However, ang atong gi-accept kay ang alternative nga hypothesis, okay, this one, ato ang gi-accept. So, that means incorrect ang claim. Kay ang ato ang hypothesis man kay is not equal to 72 years. Pwede ra dayon ka ani mag-state nga, therefore, the average life expectancy of people in a certain region is not equal to 72 years. Pwede po ka dili is not equal imong gamiton. Pwede po is not the same, is different from, and other terms pa nga pwede magamit or mo fit sa ato ang sentence. If you want to go the extra mile, pwede po dayon nimo dugangan diri nga the claim of the researcher is not correct. So, pwede na dahil na. That will be your conclusion. Okay, so let's have the next problem. A newscaster reported that the mean marrying age of female in a certain region is 23.3 years. Random samples of 9 married female from this region were interviewed. Their answers when asked on their age when they get married are as follows: 18, 21, 21, 25, 22, 22, 24, 26, 20. So test the claim at alpha is equal to 0.05. So now, diri nga example, ang atuang standard deviation is unknown. The only thing that we have is our random samples of 9 married female. So, unsa man ni siya, this will be your, okay, this is your sample size. 9 is your sample size. Unsa pa other nga given diri. So, after ani ni sample size, wala siya naghatag og mean. So, that means wala pud tay sample mean. Nalantaw nato diri ang problem. So, a newscaster reported the mean marrying age of female in a certain region is 23.3 years. So, naghatag siya claim dinhi. Kaning 23.3 years, this is your population mean. So, these are the only thing or data nga naa nato. Wala tay sample standard deviation ug wala pud tay sample mean. So, kinahanglan pa nato siya pangitaon. But, gihatag sa problem ang data. So, pwede kay nato na mapangita si sample mean as well as si sample standard deviation. So, we will have to follow this new formulas. So, for the sample mean, ang formula nato ana is just the typical formula for average of your grades. So, sample mean, x bar, is equal to decimation of all x. Diba sa inyong grades? I-add ni mo tanang grades and then i-divide kung pila ka buok subjects. So, ninana ra po ding sample mean. The summation of all x, kung sa ng x, that's your values. Ang imuhang mga data, values sa imong data. I-divide dayon siya kung pila ka buok ang imuhang data. So, that will be your sample size. So, mao ni ang formula dayon. Next is for our sample variance. Have you remembered the formula for your variance before? So, ang formula ato diba is summation of the quantity of x minus your mean raised to the power of 2 or squared. So, previously, ang imuhang formula adto man kay x minus mu squared. So, pag abot diri ni sample variance, ato siyang usbon. Anong mausub man siya from this one, from mu into this, into x bar. Because sample naman siya, sample variance. So, x bar na ang ato ang gamiton. So, this will be the formula for sample variance divided by n minus 1. Ganun na siya n minus 1, ma'am. Because, t-test naman ta. Ang sa t-test is naa siya sa small sample size na belong. So, that means, ato ang n is less than 30. So, naa siya n minus 1. Giderive ni siya nga formula from the central limit theorem. So, this is from the lesson sa atuang third quarter. Mo na naanatay new formula for the sample variance, which is this one. Summation of the quantity of x minus sample mean raised to the power of 2 all over n minus 1. So, the symbol for sample variance is s squared. So, the sample standard deviation is just the square root of the sample variance. So, unsa man dayon na siya. So, s is equal to the square root of the summation of x minus x bar squared all over n minus 1. So, since naa naman tayo formula to follow, pwede na nato mapangita ang atuang sample standard deviation. How to do that? Okay, so let's go back to the problem. So, naa sa problem diri is atuang mga values sa x. What are our values for x? We have 18 and tama ni 20. So, unsaon man na siya? So, we have to make a table. So, the table for the x. So, you are familiar with this na kaniagi naman tag din-ani nga familiar nga pagka-table. So, we have to input 18, 21, 21, 25, 22, 22, 24, 26, and 20. So, you have to put your x here. Next, unsa may kinahanglan buhaton. So, we have to find first our sample mean. So, we have to add all of our values. So, that will be the summation of x. So, unsa may summation of x ani? So, input din siya sa calculator. 18 plus 21 plus 21 plus 25 plus 22 plus 22 plus 24 plus 26 and plus 20. So, that will be 199. Now, how to get your sample mean? So, kanin si summation of x should be divided by your n. So, what will be your sample mean man dayon? So, 199 divided by your sample mean. Pila ato ang, no, not sample mean. 199 divided by our sample size. Pila atong sample size? So, i-paradigm pila na kabuk. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So, that is 9. 199 divided by 9. That is okay, 22.11. Okay, always round off to the nearest hundreds or 2 decimal places. Now, unsa may sunod buhaton? So, kay naa naman tay sample mean. Sample mean. So, mabantayan nato sa formula diri, si x minusan daw siya sa atuang sample mean. So, naa siya diri nga formula. So, atoa din siyang buhatan diri sa table. X minus our sample mean. So, si 18 minus 22.11, pila man na. So, ang 18 minus 22.11, that will be negative 4.11. So, in your calculator, magawas na si negative 4.11. I-square na dayon na siya. So, your answer dayon is 16.8921. So, x minus x bar squared. Kaya diba mampun sa itong formula nga, summation of x minus x bar squared. So, next is 21 minus 22.11. That will be negative 1.11. I-square na dahil siya diretso sa inyong calculator. So, that will be 1.2321. So, the next one is the same answer, 1.2321. So, 25 na pod minus 22.11, that is 2.89. 2.89 squared, that will be 8.3521. Next, 22 minus 22.11. So, that is negative 0.11 squared. So, that is 0.0121. The next answer is the same, negative 0.11 and 0.0121. Now, atong buhaton is 24 minus 22.11. So, that will be 1.89 squared. So, that is 3.5721. Next to that is 26 na punta. 26 minus 22.11. The answer will be 3.89. Squared ra dayon na siya, then you will achieve 15.1321. Next to that is 20 minus 22.11. The answer is negative 2.11 square. and you'll come up with 4.4521. Now that you have this one na, kaning x minus x bar squared, kani sila tanan is imuhang i-add because that will be the summation of x minus x bar squared. So, pila man dayon na. So, i-add dayon siya tanan. So, 16.8921 plus 1.2321 plus hantod sa maabot ka sa pinaka. Okay, so your answer na dayon will be 50.8889. So, ganyan itong formula sa ato ang sample variance. So, ang formula is summation of x minus x bar squared divided by n minus 1. So, this is the formula of our sample variance. So, pila man dayon na? 50.8889 divided by n minus 1, that will be 9 minus 1, so that is 8. So 50.8889 divided by 8, so your answer is 6.3611125. Then what's the important part here is to get our sample standard deviation. So ang sample standard deviation ng formula is just this one, the square root ra ani. So, unsaon man dayon na siya? S should be the square root of your sample variance, which is 6.3611125. So, pila man dayon? S will be 2.52. 21246. Round it off to the nearest hundreds, so 2.52. So, na dayon tay sample standard deviation. Pwede na dayon tamo proceed in solving the problem. So, ito lang siyang inaog gamay. So, anaon ra dayon na siya. Make your table and then use the formula to get the sample standard deviation. Now, let's go back to the problem. What's our first step naman dayon in testing our hypothesis? So, our first step na dayon is to look at its purpose, ang claim sa atuang study. So, na dinhi kay to test the claim. I-test daw nato ang claim. Unsa man natong claim? Ang claim kay ang mean marrying age of female in a certain region is 23.3 years. So, kana ang atuang i-test. Nalantawon din nato ang keywords sa atuang problem. So, niingon siya diri nga si average or si mean is 23.3 years. Pag maingon tag is, what does it mean? That means it is equal. Asa na belong na si equal sa null's alternative. Okay, so na-belong siya sa atuang null. So, ang unhon din nato gama nga hypothesis is our null hypothesis. So, what will be your null hypothesis? So, the mean marrying age of female in a certain region is equal to 23.3 years. Then making your alternative hypothesis is easy na dayon. It is just the opposite of your null hypothesis. So this will be mu is not equal to 23.3 years. Okay, so now you have your null and alternative hypothesis. What is next? So the next is to find your statistical test. So unsay test gani nato gamiton ani? So atong gamiton kay t-test. Nganong t-test man? Ang atuang sample size is 9, which is less than 30. So butang day nimo din ha, t-test. Next, what to know first after t-test? So we have to know if it is one-tailed or two-tailed. So let's look at its alternative. Unsa ang symbol? Not equal. That means this is two-tailed. Okay, next dayon ang atong pahitawon isang alpha. Unsa ng alpha? That's your level of significance. So gihatag na siya diri sa problem. So this will be 0.05. Nabatay buhaton ni alpha? Okay, naatay buhaton ni alpha. We have to divide alpha by 2. So mahimo na din siyang alpha over 2 is 0.025. Nganong i-divide siya into 2, ma'am? Nganong i-divide siya 2? Because our problem is two-tailed. So kay two-tailed man siya, kani si level of significance, i-divide nato into 2. Okay, so naa na tayo alpha over 2. What's next to know? So we have to find also the DF. Unsa nang DF gani? That's your degrees of freedom. Unsa ang formula ni degrees of freedom? So ang formula kay n minus 1. So atong n is 9 minus 1. So atong degrees of freedom kay 8. So mapakita na ba nato ang T critical or dili pa? So pwede na nato makita si T critical. How? So lantawon din nato diri sa table. So unsa to atong degrees of freedom? Our degrees of freedom is 8. So lantaw din ka diri gikan ni degrees of freedom panaog tama ni 8. So naa na ka diri ni 8. Unsa to ato ang alpha? Our alpha is 0.025. So gikan ni 8 hunong din ka to the right padulong sa column ni 0.025. So gikan ni 0.025 sa taas panaog din kataman ni DF nga 8. So kung unsay mo gawas din ha, that will be your T critical. So unsa na 2.306. So ibutang dayon nato dinhi our T critical is 2.306. So, pwede na ta maka-decide or dili pa. Okay, dili pa. Why is that? Because we still need our T computed or our T value. So, that will be your step number 3. So, unsa din tong formula sa ato ang T value? So, that will be T is equal to the X bar. Unsa ng X bar? That's your sample mean minus your mu or population mean all over your standard deviation divided by the square root of your sample size. Now, i-input ra dayon or substitute ra dayon nato atong values. What's your sample mean? So, gisolve na nato na siya ganina, diba? Unsa ang ato ang sample mean? Our sample mean is 22.11. So, i-input ra dayon nimo dinhi. 22.11 minus your population mean, which is 23.3 years. 23.3 years. After that one, all over your standard deviation. Sa problem, walay standard deviation. But, gisolve na to siya. Unsa ang ato ang standard deviation? So, naatay 2.52. So, i-input ra dayon din ha si 2.52 divided by the square root of your sample size, which is 9. Okay, after that one, input din siya sa calculator in order to find your T value. Okay, so what's your T value na dayon? Your T value will be negative 1.40166 and so on and so forth. So this could be rounded off to negative 1.42. So mo na din imong T value. Pwede na ba dayon ta maka-decide? Okay, yes, pwede na ta maka-decide because naanatay T critical, naanapod tay T value. Now let's go na dayon to step number 4. Okay, unsay unhon natong sulat diri ang T value. So disregard the negative sign, so you have 1.42. Then let's compare it to T critical nga 2.306. So what will be your decision? Which is greater? Okay, greater si T critical. So lantawon din nato sa atuang decision rule. Sa atong decision rule, if T critical is greater than our T computed, so we have to do not reject your null hypothesis. So, ang decision din ani, do not reject. the null hypothesis. You can check this using your curve. So, mag-curve dayon ka din ha. So, this is two-tailed. So, ang atuang curve has two tails. And then, unsa ang atuang T-critical gani? Our T-critical is 2.306. So, kay two-tailed man siya, so we have to put here sa left side, negative 2.306 because it is in the negative end of the distribution. And sa right is positive 2.306. Then we have to shade our rejection region. Okay, so after shading, ato na dayong i-plaster asa na belong ang atuang t-value nga negative 1.42. So asa man na siya dapit? Diri sa right, in the middle, or sa left side, the negative 2.306. So sa negative 1.42, it is somewhere here. Naa siya diri sa tunga-tunga. This wala siya na-appeal sa itong rejection region. That means, ang atuang decision is correct. Do not reject our null hypothesis. Now, the next step here is to make your conclusion. So, atong decision is do not reject man, di ba? So, kung do not reject, si null hypothesis kay atuang kay i-accept nato ang atuang null hypothesis. Kay do not reject man. So, diri dayon nimo ibase ang imuang conclusion. So, sa conclusion, pwede din ka mag-ingon nga therefore, the mean marrying age of female in a certain region is 23.3 years. So, kung unsay naa sa imuhang hypothesis nga gi-accept, maura dayon ibutang diri sa conclusion. So, equal man siya. So, maura po na ang imong diri is 23.3 years. So, if you want to go the extra mile, pwede dayon nimo siya sumpayan diri og hence the claim of the newscaster is correct. So, maura dayon na imo ang conclusion. Okay na dayon siya. Okay, so let's have our last example for t-test. Okay, let's read. It was announced over the radio that the average price of a kilogram of pork liempo in Metro Manila is 195 pesos. However, a sample of 15 pieces randomly collected from different markets in Metro Manila showed an average of 200 pesos and a standard deviation of 9 and 50 centavos. Using a 0.05 level of significance, is there a sufficient evidence to conclude that the average price of pork liempo in Metro Manila is more than 195 pesos? So now, unsa tong una gay natong i-check to know the type of test nga gamiton sa problem? So atong i-check ang sample size. So basahon na to diri lang tawo na to ha. However, a sample of 15 pieces. So, kani nga sample gikuhaan sa atuang data. That means atuang sample size is 15. So, ang N nato is 15. So, unsa man nga test atong gamiton? Z-test or T-test? So, ang atuang N is less than 30. That means ang atong gamiton kay T-test. So, kay T-test man, kabalo na ta, pwede na din ta mo proceed. What's next? So, the first part here is knowing the purpose of the study. Unsa may purpose sa study? So, naadiri sa last part, is there a sufficient evidence to conclude nga ang average sa price of pork liempo in Metro Manila is more than 195 pesos. So, mao ni ang purpose sa study to check if ang average price is more than ba 195 pesos. So, unsa may key term din ani? So, ang key term nato diri makita nato ning words nga more than, kining phrase nga more than. So, asa man na belong ng more than? Naba na sa null or sa alternative? Okay, so that is right. This belongs to the alternative. So, for the first step, nga magama ta og hypothesis, unsa may ato ang unhogama? Ang alternative. Kay mao may given sa problem. Naghatag man siya diri og keywords nga more than. So, unsa may danon atong ibutang diri? So, our alternative hypothesis is the average is more than man daw. So, more than 195 pesos. Now that you have your alternative, easier na dayon ang paggama ni null hypothesis. Why? Kay opposite raman na silang duha. Okay. So, kay opposite raman siya, unsa man dayon ang ato ang null. So, pwede na dayon ta magbutang diri, our average is less than, di ba the opposite of more than, kay less than or fewer than. And since it is null, always include the sense of equality. It is fewer than or less than and or equal to 195 pesos. So, naana kay duha ka alternative. Your null, no, not duha ka alternative, but hypothesis. Your null and alternative hypothesis. What's next to do? Pangitaon day nimo ang statistical test. So, first to write here is your type of test nga gamiton. We will use man-t test because ato ang sample size is 15. Now, after that one, we have to know if it is one-tailed or two-tailed. So, unsa man ni siya nga problem? Is it one-tailed or two-tailed? So, lantawon din nato ang symbols alternative. Naa siya diri, ang symbol is greater than, more than, or similar words with that. Unsa man dayon ni siya. So, this is one-tailed. One-tailed ang atuang problem. Specifically, more than. Asa man na siya na belong? To the positive end of the distribution. That means this is right tail. Okay. After that one, what's next to find? So, paggamiton dahil na to ang atuang alpha. So, unsa tong alpha? 0.05. Unsa ng alpha again? Alpha is your level of significance. Now, naabatay buhato ni alpha? Wala. I-divide siya 2 or dili. So, okay, so that's right. Si alpha is dili na to i-divide into 2. Why is that? Because our problem is one-tailed. Kay one-tailed man siya, wala tay buhato ni alpha. And then, after that one, unsa pa next? So, paitaon na nato ang T-critical. Unsay kinahanglan para makita si T-critical? So, you will need your degrees of freedom. Unsa nang degrees of freedom gani? That is your DF. That's your degrees of freedom. Unsay formula ni degrees of freedom? N minus 1. So, unsay mong N? 15 minus 1. So, that will be 14. So, your DF is 14. Your alpha is 0.05. So, pwede na nato mapangita si T-critical using the table. So, adto ta sa table. Okay. So, it's here. I-erase lang sa nato ni. What's your DF again? Okay, so your DF is 14. So, gikan diri ni DF, just go down towards 14. Afterwards, lantawon din nimo ang alpha. Unsa to atong alpha? Let's check. So, our alpha is 0.05. Now, kay 0.05 man siya. So, gikan ni 14, go to the right, taman sa column ni 0.05. So, gikan sa 0.05 diri sa taas, panaog ka tama ni 14. So, kung unsay mo gawas din ha, unsay value dira, that will be your T-critical, si 1.761. So, ibutang na dayon nato siya diri para maka-decide na ta, our T-critical is 1.761. Is that right? Okay, so that's right. 1.761. Now, pwede na ta mag-decide or dili pa. Okay, that's right. Dili pa. Why? Because we still need our t value or t computed. That is in step number 3. So, si t is equal to, unsa tong formula again? X bar. Unsa ng X bar? That's your sample mean minus your mu population mean divided by your standard deviation, which is the small letter s, divided by your square root of your sample size. Okay, so substitute ra dayon what's your sample mean. Kilantawa dayon dinhi. Si sample nga 15 naa siya mean or average nga 200 pesos. Kining 200 pesos, mean daw siya or average daw siya sa atong sample size nga 15. So, unsa may tawag ani nga mean? Nga mean man siya ni sample size. So, this will be your sample mean. So, isulat din mo siya dinhi. Your sample mean is 200 minus your population mean. Unsa ang imong population mean? Ang population mean nimo is 195 pesos. So, substitute it there. And then, your standard deviation is given. So, gihatag si standard deviation that is 9 pesos and 50 cents. So, 9.50 divided by the square root of your sample size. Pila ang sample size? That is 15. So, now all you need to do is to input this sa calculator. So, what will be your t value naman dayon? So, your t value na dayon is 2.038 or 2.04. Round it off to the nearest hundredths or 2 decimal places. So, naa na kay t value nga 2.04. Can we decide na ba? Okay, yes, we can decide na sa kung ato bang i-reject or i-accept si null hypothesis. So, unsaon man siya? That will be in step number 4. So, unsay una hug isulat diri? Okay, our t value. So, that is 2.04, which is greater than our t critical nga 1.761. So, unsa man dayon ang decision nato ani? Okay, let's go back to the decision rule. So, the decision rule nag-ingon mo kasi t computed is greater than our t critical. Unsay buhaton? Okay, we have to reject the null hypothesis. So, atong decision din diri kay reject the null hypothesis. You can also check this one with doing your curve or your graph. So, this is one-tailed and specifically to the right, so ang tail naa diri. Unsa to atong t critical? Our t critical is 1.761. Now we just have to draw or shade our rejection region and i-plaster nato si t computed. Asa man na siya mabutang? Diri sa left ni 1.761 or diri sa right ni 1.761. So si 2.04 na siya diri somewhere after 1.761. So na siya diri 2.04. So it is located within our rejection region. So that means our decision should be rejecting our null hypothesis. Now, what's the next step here? That is to make your conclusion. So, in making your conclusion, basihan nato ang atoang decision. So, atong decision daw is to reject our null hypothesis. So, unsay mahitabo diri? So, kani si null hypothesis, i-reject nato. I-reject nato siya. That means, i-accept nato si alternative hypothesis. So, mawala din siya basihan sa imuang conclusion. So, state dayon nimo diri unsa ang imong ang alternative gani nga gi-accept. Average is more than 195 pesos. So, state ra dayon nimo na diri sa imong conclusion. Therefore, the average price of a kilogram of pork liempo is more than 195 pesos. Okay, if you wanna go the extra mile, so you can also sumpay it with, or you can also state here nga there is sufficient evidence to conclude that the claim is correct. Or pwede ra jud nga kopyaon nimo dining naa diri nga part sa last part. So mingon din ka nga therefore there is sufficient evidence to conclude kay correct man ang imuhang claim. So kopyaa ra dayon ni. Kawas kung dili siya correct, so you have to change something para mobagay sa unsa ang hypothesis nga imong gi-accept. So, kay correct man ang iyahang claim, so pwede ra nimo siya kopyaon din ha. So, pwede na dahil ka mo state ani as your conclusion, the average price of a kilogram of pork liempo is more than 195 pesos. So, there is sufficient evidence to conclude that the claim is correct. Okay, so ninani ra dayon ang ato ang pag-test sa whether to reject or to accept your hypothesis using t-test. Ang nausobra siya nga part is the finding of your t-critical. And if wala gihatag si standard deviation, si sample standard deviation, pangitaon pa ninyo na siya. So, dili kalimtan that we need the DF or your degrees of freedom. And if one-tailed, wala tayo buhaton ni alpha. And if it is two-tailed, we have to divide it by 2. So, maura na siya importante nga hinumduman for t-test.